Hello, this is Judy, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the April 13th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I will do my best to pronounce all names and words correctly, yet please forgive me if I do not. And our first article is a Star exclusive, and the title is Toronto was just days away from defaulting on troubled St. Lawrence Market project, documents reveal. Documents obtained by the Star through a Freedom of Information show a senior manager privately acknowledging that city staff's handling of the project could give the city a black eye. And it says, although the redevelopment of St. Lawrence Market North was initially supposed to be complete by June 2022, the building finally welcomed back the farmers market in April 2025. And this article is written by Ben Spurr, SPURR, who is a City Hall bureau chief. The City of Toronto was days away from being unable to pay the bills for its costly St. Lawrence Market North redevelopment project after an employee approved cost increases without proper authorization. How close the municipality came to missing payments on the $128 million redevelopment 2 years ago, a scenario that could have led to its main contractor walking off the job and delaying the project indefinitely, is revealed in emails the Star has obtained through a Freedom of Information request. The documents show a senior manager privately acknowledging that city staff's handling of the project could give them a black eye. They also offer insight into the tension between Toronto and its main contractor, which has since bought an $83 million lawsuit against the municipality over the delayed project, the plan, and the execution. The redevelopment of the historic downtown site at Jarvis and Front Streets began in 2019. The upgraded facility was intended to host the long-running St. Lawrence Farmers Market, as well as provide a new home for the city's downtown court services and additional parking. Although the project was initially supposed to be complete by June of 2022, by June of 2024, the building still wasn't open. Meanwhile, costs were rising beyond the approved $116 million budget. As previously reported on July 2nd, 2024, staff brought a report to Council's General Government Committee stating they had been forced to authorize an emergency $9.5 million increase to the city's agreement with its main contractor. The report attributed the delays and cost overruns to COVID-19, design changes, and errors and omissions made by the city's main architect. Under questioning from councilors, however, staff in the Corporate Real Estate Management Division revealed that they had been caught off guard by the higher cost after discovering that an employee had improved expenses beyond the project budget without proper authority. Staff signed off on the costly contract increase on June 6th, an extraordinary move that bypassed the regular council spending approval process, but which is permitted in emergency situations. By that time, there was just $347,000 left in the project budget, with a contractor bill of $711,000 due 8 days later on June 14th, according to a briefing note contained in the Freedom of Information documents. Additional bills for about $1 million each were set to come due in July and August that year. What was at stake? According to the memo, if the city had been unable to pay on time, it risked being default of its contract, as well as violating the Construction Act, which requires the city to pay an invoice within 28 days. There was also a risk that the contractor, a joint venture of Butcon Limited and the Atlas Corporation, BAJV, would terminate the contract and walk away from the project, delaying it indefinitely. While the emergency contract change kept the project on track, in a June 4, 2024 internal email discussing the amendment, Deputy City Manager David Jollimore, and that's Jollimore, acknowledged staff's handling of St. Lawrence Market North could undermine confidence in the city's ability to deliver major capital work. I do not need to tell you that exercising an emergency, non-competitive procurement and needing to bring a purchase order amendment that committee council would have no choice but to approve does not reflect well on us and our management of a large-scale capital projects, he wrote. We need to do better moving forward and ensure that we have adequate oversight to ensure that projects get delivered on time and on budget. According to the briefing note, after discovering the improper approvals, the city took immediate steps to tighten financial controls, including updating invoice approval procedures and updating training. The manager who improperly approved the additional payments, an apparent violation of the city's purchasing bylaw according to the FOIL documents, is no longer with the city, staff told committee in June 2024. Tensions laid bare. Emails included in the Freedom of Information documents also provide a glimpse at what has become a high-stake legal dispute between the city and BAJV. In a June 14, 2024 email chain, a city project director noted that the contractor hadn't provided a cost estimate for changes to the project. That risked further delaying the work while the price was sorted out. A vice president of operations with Butcon wrote back that the city has been its own worst enemy and BAJV was not prepared to spend any more of its money without being paid. In March 2025, the joint venture made a similar argument in court when it sued the city for cost equivalent to almost 2/3 of the entire project budget, alleging the municipality was in breach of contract and hadn't paid the company for all of its work. In November, the city filed a statement of defense blaming BAJV for the project's problems and made an $8.3 million counterclaim for delayed damages and outstanding deficiencies. St. Lawrence Market North isn't the only project overseen by the city's corporate real estate management division that has come under scrutiny. Last month, Councillor Chris Moise, and that's Moise, of Toronto Centre, introduced a council motion requiring greater transparency from the department when projects go over budget, after a woman's drop-in center in his ward was hit by years of delays and soaring costs. A spokesperson for Moise, whose ward also includes St. Lawrence Market, said the councillor couldn't comment on the redevelopment while it was subject of a lawsuit. But in a statement, Moise said he's committed to improving how Toronto manages projects and bringing more transparency to multi-million-dollar construction and renovation contracts. BAJV achieved substantial completion on St. Lawrence Market North redevelopment in November 2024, according to court documents, and the building welcomed back the farmers market last April. And Ben Spur is the Star City Hall Bureau Chief. You can reach him, based in Toronto. You can reach him by email at bspurr@THESTAR.ca. Our next article is under GTA, and the title is Billy Bishop Airport Expansion Gets Toronto Island Residents in Fight Mode. It's a sin. Islanders have staged many protests over the years, including for the right to live there. Ford's plans for the Jets have some girding for the next battle. And this article is written by Francine Copun, Kopapun, who is a senior writer. On a sunny weekday afternoon in April, Toronto Island residents gather in 3 small rooms at the back of an old cottage, lovingly restored for community events and to provide some rental housing for the aging population. It's market day for seniors who are living on fixed incomes or can no longer make the trip over to the city for fresh produce as they once did. The event was organized by neighbors for neighbors who pay what they can. Residents lean into door frames and sink into deep floral sofas, heads bent in conversation. Top of mind is Premier Doug Ford's plan to expand Billy Bishop Airport to handle 10 million passengers annually, up from the current 2 million, which would mean a bigger airport, jets, and more frequent flights. Ford announced earlier this month that the province plans to take the City of Toronto's place in the tripartite agreement that governs the island airfield in order to expand the runway so jets can land, because he felt Toronto Council was impeding the process. Citing Toronto Port Authority data, Ford claimed that an expanded airport will contribute up to $8.5 billion to Canada's economy every year by 2050 and support up to 23,000 jobs in Ontario's construction sector. Residents of the Toronto Islands, who have staged numerous protests over the years to win the right to live on the islands, to save their old school, to prevent construction of a land link and block a previous airport expansion effort, are girding for a battle that seems all too familiar. They say expanding the airport will mean gobbling up space in an already crowded harbor, bring more noise and pollution to a rare area of wilderness in a city of nearly 3 million people, create more traffic around Bathurst Street and Queens Quay, an area that is already grappling with gridlock, and that jets are an overall bad fit for the waterfront, an area that has become intensely residential and is set to become more so. The jets would fly over the new neighborhoods that are sprouting up like weeds on the city's eastern waterfront, raising concerns that the heights of some of the new residential towers being planned will have to be trimmed. It's a sin, it's a shame, said artist Lida Engler, Englar, 82 years old, who has lived on Algonquin Island for 52 years. We have so much to do in this province, and he's going to spend money to expand an airport. Like many other island residents, Engler has engaged in her share of protests over the years, beginning with fighting expropriation in the 1970s. She and her husband Jerry were also instrumental in having the old island school preserved after it had been slated for demolition. It now operates as a Gibraltar Point Center for the Arts. Engler says she and her husband once spent 100 Fridays greeting passengers on the city side of airport operations to build support for having the airport turned into a park. I will go out in the street again, says Engler, referring to opposition to the proposed new airport expansion. I will do what I do. I will stand up at meetings. I will speak my mind. I try to encourage others, especially young people, to get your revolution on. We're not 1%ers. Ford has brushed off Islanders' concern, calling them squatters and 1%ers. Engler laughs at the idea. There may be 1 millionaire on the islands, but we're definitely not 1%ers, she chuckles. The island community has gone from one of Canada's youngest census tracts in the 1970s to one of the oldest today. An unscientific needs assessment conducted in 2022 by a committee of islanders found that the median age of residents was 62 years old. The largest source of income for respondents was the Canada Pension Plan, followed by Old Age Security and employers' pensions. 6% reported difficulty paying for food, and 10% reported not eating regular meals at least some of the time. The financial status of the majority of community members is sufficient to meet their needs, the study concluded. There is a minority that are struggling and probably some others whose situation may deteriorate over time or with significant stressors. In all, 279 people responded, about half of the adult population of the islands. Residents also pushed back against the idea that the city spends a fortune to maintain them. The ferries operate mainly to transport the tourists who visit the islands every year, 1.5 million in 2025, up from 1.4 million in 2024. According to the city, efforts are underway to modernize the Toronto Island Park's infrastructure and expand visitor amenities, which include adding more cycling options last year, said city spokesperson Amber Nasrullah, Nasrullah. The city doesn't break out costs by neighborhood and cannot provide a figure for what it costs to provide services to the island's resident neighborhoods, Nasrallah says. A spokesperson for the Toronto Port Authority said they could not comment on the airport expansion at this time. In the next week or so, we will begin engagement with media and stakeholder groups regarding the future vision for the airport, which will address many of the concerns of the residents, said Claire Pfeiffer. Pam Massa's husband grew up on Kwajalein Island, and they brought up their own 3 children in a house they purchased in 1975 facing the Toronto skyline. Massa acknowledges she has a $1 million view, but preserving it has required grit and nerve and some highly organized protesting. At that time, in the early 70s, the sheriff was going to come any second, says Mazza, adding that residents were on year-to-year leases at that time. Mazza said residents modeled their protest after the Great British Home Guard in the Second World War, when ordinary citizens were trained in tactics to disrupt and disorient German troops in the event of an invasion, for example, by removing street signs and sabotaging supply lines. Massa said things on the islands came to a head one day in the 1980s when an informant at City Hall told him that a sheriff was due to arrive with expropriation orders. A warning siren was sounded, triggering a wave of phone calls to residents working in the city. A fleet of boats went out to pick them up. By the time the sheriff arrived at the bridge to the homes on Kwajalein Island, he was met by a crowd of protesters blocking his way. Massa says when she first heard the siren, she was so primed to go that she left her newborn sleeping upstairs and had to run back to get her. The sheriff backed down, and the expropriation issue was eventually resolved in a 1993 by then Premier Bob Rae's government, which granted island residents ownership of their homes and 99-year leases on the land. The whole harborfront area has been completely transformed in the 15 years that Massa has lived on Kwajalein, and that transformation has made the airport a bit of an anachronism, she says. There could be housing there, a market, a Granville Island, referring to a popular Vancouver redevelopment, affordable rental cottages for people who can't afford Muskoka, she says. She says the harbor is busy enough without a larger airport taking up more space and shrinking the amount of space for sailors, boaters, and paddlers. It's hazardous now. There's so many boats and users. If you had the expanded airport taking up even more space in the harbor, how is that going to work? Kwajalein Island resident Tony Fairbrother, and that's Farebrother, swung by the fresh market at Shaw House to drop off a free pot of soup. He's a relative newbie, a resident for just over 30 years. He said a lot of residents are used to the airport and have learned to live with it. Airport authorities have been helpful in the past in emergencies or when the ferry service breaks down. The whole idea of expanding it, we just don't see how it's compatible with the way everyone is envisioning the waterfront. The islands have been a place for rest, relaxation, and healing since first visited by the indigenous peoples, he points out. Let's do some visioning about what it could be. As Fairbrother speaks, someone sits down at the upright piano in the corner to play the sheet music that happened to be parked on the ledge. It's Blackbird, a Beatles song written by Paul McCartney, inspired by the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, the perfect musical calling card for a community that has so often banded together to fight and appears likely to fight again. And Francine Copen is a Toronto Star journalist and senior writer based in Toronto. Our next article is under GTA, and the title is Camel from Endangered Species Expecting Baby at Toronto Zoo. Bacterian, and that's Bacterian, S-U-R-I-A-N, maybe it's Bactrin, camel Surya, and that's S-U-R-I-A, is pregnant and due to give birth in the coming weeks, the zoo announced in a Sunday social media post. And this article is written by Maya Tustonic, who's a staff reporter, and that's Tustonic. The Toronto Zoo is expecting a new family member. Bactrin camel Surya is pregnant and due to give birth in the coming weeks, the zoo announced in a Sunday social media post. The calf will be 11-year-old Surya's third calf with her partner Zip. Surya's second calf was born in May 2023. Our Eurasa, EURASIA Wilds team is closely monitoring her as she embarks on this special journey into motherhood once again, the zoo said. The pregnancy was confirmed by an ultrasound, which the zoo said highlights advancements in veterinary care. Bactrin camels are recognized by their two humps, in which they store fat to help them survive extreme environments like the deserts of Central Asia, to which they are native, the zoo said. They are built to withstand both the scorching heat and freezing cold, the zoo said. Wild Bactrin camels are critically endangered, the zoo said, adding that fewer than 950 of the camels remain in remote Mongolia and China. Surya's pregnancy plays a key role in preserving the species, the zoo said. Moments like this highlight the importance of wildlife conservation and the role accredited zoos and conservation organizations like your Toronto Zoo play in protecting species like Bactrin camels for future generations, the zoo said. And Maya Tustonic is a staff reporter at the zoo. You can reach her at her email, which is mtustonic @THESTAR.ca. The next article is under sports, and it's titled Leafs. Do the Maple Leafs really play in a tough NHL market? It depends on who you ask. The white noise comes with the territory of being a Toronto Maple Leaf, which makes some wonder if this market is tougher on players than others. And this article is written by Kevin McGran, McGran, who is a sports reporter. Veteran Max Domi was polite when asked how he drowns out the white noise from the know-it-all types and wannabe GMs who at times can overpower the conversation surrounding the Maple Leafs. I don't care what anyone else has to say other than the guys in this room, Domi said. If I was going to go to you for advice about how to run the half wall, I'd ask you. People have jobs to talk about stuff, and fans are right to say whatever they want. But we're hockey players. We worry about what goes on the ice. I understand there's noise and whatnot, but you don't read it, you don't watch it, you don't listen to it. Domi has an advantage over other players. He grew up in the Toronto market as the son of a popular Leafs player. Ty Domi handled himself well on the ice and off, able to tune out the sounds of whinging media and grouchy fans. The white noise comes with the territory of playing for the Leafs, which makes some wonder if this market is tougher on players than others. I think it depends on the individual, Leafs coach Craig Berube said. But at the same time, it's a privilege to be in this kind of market. Personally, I've been on the other side of where, well, it's not boring, but it's different. Hockey is king in the 7 Canadian markets and a handful of American ones. Florida Panthers coach Paul Maurice has coached in Toronto and Winnipeg, as well as Hartford, Carolina, and Florida, where hockey is more of a niche sport. He understands the pressure that comes in the Canadian market. There are far more challenges, Maurice said, offering an example of how he adjusted his coaching to fit his 2-year tenure as Leafs coach. If I change a line in practice, I've got 30 cameras at that guy's stall, the guy who came off the second line and moved to the third line. It might just be I wanted a switch, but that becomes a story. So I always did it in-game, and then the story was I just wanted to give the other guy a chance. But he kept the cameras and microphones away from a player who would otherwise have to answer awkward questions about being moved off a line. It can also be a wonderful thing, but sometimes in these markets, it's like a drive-by shooting every day, he said. The conversations around the Leafs now, in traditional and social media, are about missing the playoffs, tanking, the draft, and the current search for a head of hockey operations. But that's not what the players experience in their interaction with fans. My experience around the city is just how supportive people are, no matter the circumstances, whether it's the last couple of weeks or after Game 7 last year, veteran center John Tavares said. Throughout my time as a Leaf, the excitement people have for the team and the passion is unwavering. The support we get is incredible. There's a lot of noise at times, but it just speaks to what this team means to so many people. The logic of Toronto being too tough on market to succeed doesn't hold much water, especially considering the team won the Stanley Cup 13 times in its first 50 years. The New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers do well in baseball mad markets. Ditto the Los Angeles Lakers and Boston Celtics in their respective basketball towns. People love the Leafs, said former GM Brian Burke. Overall, it's a plus. The mainstream medium has been fair since I've been here. When we played poorly, they wrote that. When we played well, they wrote that. Social media is vicious, but it's like that everywhere. Just more volume in Toronto. I would recommend anyone to play here. I love my time here. And Kevin McGran is a star sports reporter based in Toronto. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is titled Nova Scotia, and the title is Hundreds of Nova Scotia Long-Term Care Workers Expected to Strike This Morning. In Halifax, hundreds of workers from almost 24 long-term care homes in Nova Scotia are expected to hit picket lines this morning after contract negotiation reached an impasse. And this article is written by the Canadian Press. Hundreds of workers from almost 24 long-term care homes in Nova Scotia are expected to hit picket lines this morning after contract negotiations reached an impasse. The Canadian Union of Public Employees has said more than 2,200 staffers from 22 facilities will be on the picket lines, but more are expected to follow in the coming days. Affected workers run the gamut from continuing care assistants and licensed practical nurses to housekeeping staff and physiotherapists. Union spokesperson Ty Lopi says the workers feel they have been pushed to this job action as they fight for a living wage. Bargaining between the Nova Scotia government and CUPE is for long-term care agreements that expired in 2023. Nova Scotia's long-term care minister, Barbara Adams, says the labor action will cause challenges, but agreements are in place so that essential care continues. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published April 13, 2026. The next article is under federal politics, and the title is Jobs Minister Urges Youth to Pursue Skilled Trades Despite Generational Stigma. Federal Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu, HHADU, says Canada must break the stigma around careers in the skilled trades if the Liberals want to achieve their infrastructure and home building agenda. And this article is written by Craig Lord of the Canadian Press. Federal Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu says Canada must break the stigma around careers in the skilled trades if the Liberals want to achieve their infrastructure and home building agenda. Hajdu said when she was growing up in Thunder Bay, Ontario, students who attended a skilled trades high school in the city were deeply stigmatized by their choice. She says over the past 4 decades, youth have been told a university degree was the best path to success, even though skilled trades careers can come with high earning potential. Hajdu says the federal government is looking into incentives to help young Workers complete apprenticeships and training in fields like construction as older workers retire and threaten to constrain Canada's building capacity. Prime Minister Mark Carney said last week it is a great time for youth to get into the trades as the Liberals plan long-term investments in housing and infrastructure. Hajdu is at the University of Ottawa today, touting the federal government's efforts to make education more affordable. This next article is under business, and it's 5 things to watch for in the Canadian business world in the coming week. And this is written by the Canadian Press. In Toronto, 5 things to watch for in the Canadian business world in the coming week. Energy meeting. The 2026 BMO CAPP Energy Symposium takes place Tuesday and Wednesday in Toronto. Leaders in the upstream oil and gas sector are to share their thoughts on the state of the industry with investors at the annual conference. Economic data. Statistics Canada will release a pair of economic reports Wednesday that will help offer a glimpse as to how the economy fared in February. The agency is expected to publish its latest monthly survey of manufacturing and wholesale trade report. Home sales. The Canadian Real Estate Association will release its home sales figures for March on Thursday. February saw a total of 30,244 homes change hands across Canada, down 8.1% from the same month last year. Sales also fell 1.3% month over month on a seasonally adjusted basis. GTO meeting. GTO finance ministers and central bank governors are set to meet in Washington on Thursday. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank will also hold their spring meetings in Washington this week. The gatherings come as the world deals with the fallout of the war in the Middle East. Housing starts. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp will release its March figures for housing starts on Friday. The annual pace of housing starts rose 4.5% in February as the seasonally adjusted annual rate of housing starts rose to 259,000 units compared with 148,000 units in January. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published April 12, 2026. This next article is under Europe, and the title is In Their Words, How Leaders Reacted to Viktor Orban's Defeat in Hungary's Election. Budapest, Hungary. Hungary's Viktor Orban had such an outsized global influence that his crushing electoral defeat is resounding far and wide. And this article is by the Associated Press. Budapest, Hungary. Hungary's Viktor Orban had such an outsized global influence that his crushing electoral defeat is resounding far and wide. Here's how global leaders reacted in their words. There was no immediate comment from the Trump administration, which campaigned for Orban. Ukraine has a lot at stake. Orban repeatedly blocked aid for Ukraine to fend off Russia's full-scale invasion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky quickly reacted to incoming leader Peter Magyar, Magyar, in hopes of support. It is important when constructive approach prevails. Ukraine has always sought good neighborly relations with everyone in Europe, and we are ready to advance our cooperation with Hungary, he posted on social media. We are ready for meetings and joint constructive work for the benefit of both nations, as well as peace, security, and stability in Europe, Zelensky said. Russia and China played it safe. Orban was Russia's closest ally in the European nation and courted China. Both countries seemed to distance themselves from him after Magyar's win. Hungary has made its choice, and we respect that choice, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, Peskov, told reporters. We expect to continue our very pragmatic contacts with the new Hungarian leadership. Asked about the impact of Hungary's vote on the conflict in Ukraine, Peskov responded that, I don't think this has anything to do with the future of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Chinese Foreign Minister spokesperson Jiao Jiaqun, and that's Jiakun, said in Beijing that China attaches great importance to the development of China-Hungary relations and stands ready to work with Hungary's new government based on mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit. For many in Europe, a sigh of relief. Orban was constantly critical of the EU, even though his country enjoyed billions in funding from the bloc. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Leyen, a frequent target of Orban's pronouncements, said, "Europe is Hungarian today." British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Starmer, called it an historical moment not only for Hungary but for European democracy. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Merz, messaged Mayer and said, "Let's join forces for a strong, secure, and above all, united Europe." Glutakov, Kiev's Mayer Peter. French President Emmanuel Macron said that France welcomes the victory of a democratic participation, the Hungarian people's commitment to the values of the European Union. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, traveling to South Korea, posted a video clip apparently showing him speaking to Magyar by phone while overlooking the Korean capital. "Oh, I am so happy. I think I'm happier than you know," Tusk said in English. In his victory speech, Magyar said that his first foreign stop would be to Poland, which has historically had friendly ties to Hungary. Fellow populists choose their words carefully. Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni thanked her friend Viktor Orban for their collaboration. "I know that even from the opposition, he will continue to serve his nation." France's far-right National Rally, jockeying to replace Macron in the French presidency next year, supported Orban and tread cautiously after his defeat. This result, respectively welcomed by Viktor Orban, shows that the incessant accusations by European institutions in recent years against Hungarian democracy were unfounded, posted the party's president, Jordan Bardella. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, MODI, for his part, offered his heartiest congratulations to Magyar on X. "I look forward to working closely with you to further strengthen our bilateral cooperation and to advance the vital India-EU strategic partnership for the shared prosperity and well-being of our peoples," he wrote. And this article is written by the Associated Press. This next article is in the business section, and it's an opinion article. And the title is "The 10-Day Cash Only Challenge. Can You Do It?" And this article is written by Leslie Ann Scorgie, Scorgie, who is a contributing columnist. And she is a Toronto-based personal finance columnist and a freelance contributing columnist for The Star. "We live in a tap-to-pay world. It's never been easier to lose track of where your money is going. This cash-only system isn't about going backwards. It's about regaining control of your money. Behaviorally, cash works because it creates friction. That small pause between deciding to and then spending your physical cash is often enough to interrupt impulse habits and bring intention to your purchases. It's a highly successful strategy for Canadians who are trying to reset their money habits, are highly visual or hands-on learners, impulsive spenders, chronic overspenders, and folks carrying high credit card balances. When my community members try the cash system wholeheartedly for just 10 days, the results are powerful. Immediate awareness of spending and a heck of a lot of money saved, a few hundred to more than $1,000 in that short window. Curious and want to try the cash system for yourself? Here's how to set yourself up. Think of it as the 10-day experiment. Step 1. Focus on 3 to 5 spending categories. Start small by choosing 3 to 5 areas where you will tend to overspend. This might include dining out, alcohol and cannabis, groceries, hobbies, nails, sports betting, shopping, entertainment, streaming, or concerts. Avoid choosing fixed expenses like rent, your mortgage, or a car payment. Reviewing your banking and credit card transactions over the past month to get a sense of what you've spent in those categories. If you spent $300 on fast food, for example, set a cash goal of no more than $200 for your 10-day challenge. Repeat for the other categories and tally up the total cash you'll need. Step 2. Withdraw the cash and divide it up. It will feel like a lot of money because it is. Split the cash into the respective categories. You can place the cash in envelopes, sections of your wallet, paper-clipped bills and Ziploc bags, whatever you want as long as it's separated. Put a label on each so it reads clearly, like $150 for groceries, $50 for fast food. Now remove your credit cards from your wallet and pop them into a drawer at home. For emergencies, keep your debit card handy, but don't use it unless you absolutely have to. Want my pro tip? Start with slightly less cash than you think you'll need. You might unearth a side of resourcefulness that's been lying dormant. Step 3. Every time you spend in those categories, use the cash. Watch the money leave your hands. Pay attention to how it feels when you hand it over. Lightly start to track how you're managing the cash system. If the cash in one category is dwindling, you'll have to be more conservative with your spending. Step 4. The limits are the guide you've been looking for. When you run low or run out in one category, you have options. Stop spending, relocate from another category, delay the purchase, return something you don't need, or find a way to drum up additional cash. This is the art of prioritization, priorities, an essential skill when learning to manage money. By the end of the 10 days, you'll know more about your spending habits than you have in months, maybe years. And while you may not stick with cash forever, you'll carry forward something far more valuable: awareness, discipline, and a renewed sense of control over your money. Because the goal isn't to change how you pay, it's to change how you think with parting with your hard-earned dollars. This next article is under politics, and the title is Ontario School Board Trustees to Lose Many Powers. TDSB trustees to be slashed, Minister announces. English school boards will also soon have a chief executive officer in charge to oversee budgeting and negotiations, and a chief education office. And this article is written by Kristen Ryshkowy, and that's Rushowy, Ryshkowy, who's a senior writer. Okay, elected trustees will remain at all Ontario school boards, but have less responsibility and be fewer in number, with the Toronto Public Board being cut almost in half. Under sweeping changes announced Monday by Education Minister Paul Calandra, and that's Calandra. English school boards will also soon have a chief executive officer in charge, someone with business experience to oversee budgeting and negotiations, as well as a chief education officer who must hold teacher and supervisory office certification to oversee student achievement. These are among the long-awaited governance reforms being introduced by Calandra and his Putting Student Achievement First Act. He had previously said he might eliminate elected trustees, but instead has decided to keep them in limited roles. Boards will be allowed to have a maximum of 12 trustees, which only affects the Toronto Public Board, which has the most at 22. All trustees' discretionary spending will be cut, as will their annual honorarium. The chief executive officer takes charge of the budget process, as well as contract negotiations with teacher and support staff unions. Calandra also announced some changes for high schools, including requiring written exams during a scheduled exam period as opposed to accumulating assignments, as well as making attendance count for 10 to 15% of final marks for teens, so that grade expectations and breakdowns are clearer. Absences for sicknesses, appointments, or religious holidays won't be penalized. Ontario's education system must remain focused on its core responsibility, student success, Calandra said in a written statement before introducing his bill in the legislature. Ontario's teachers and education workers are dedicated professionals who work tirelessly every day to support students, often under challenging circumstances. They deserve stable, account leadership that supports their work and puts learning first. Teachers will also only be able to use ministry-approved resources to ensure consistency across the province. Calandra said that the government reforms will help boards with their budget challenges. He has taken over 8 boards and sent in provincial supervisors, citing financial mismanagement, though boards have argued that they are underfunded, especially in areas like special education. He would also have the final say over any budget matters that trustees cannot agree on, as well as if a chief executive officer could be fired. The cost of hiring the new chief executive officer role was not immediately available. The legislation also names the Council of Ontario Directors of Education as a provincial bargaining agent for English public and Catholic boards, instead of the current model with trustee organizations at the table, with the rationale that the directors oversee the front lines and have a better idea of what is needed. The Catholic trustee organization, however, retains its role regarding denominational issues, and French trustee associations will continue their current roles. Calandra and Colleges and Universities Minister Nolan Quinn last week announced they were trimming teacher education from the current 4 semesters over 2 years to a full year over 3 back-to-back semesters. The government is also going to provide elementary teachers with a $750 spending card annually to purchase classroom supplies. And this is a developing story. And this next article is under the United States, and the title is Pope Leo says he does not fear Trump, citing gospel as he pushes back in the feud over Iran war. He's a very liberal person, Trump said of Leo, before adding, I'm not a fan of Pope Leo. And this article is written by Will Weissart, Weissert, Josh Boak, Boka, and Nicole Winfield, Winfield, of the Associated Press. U.S.-born Pope Leo pushed back Monday on President Donald Trump's broadside against him over the U.S.-Israel war in Iran, telling reporters that the Vatican appeals for peace and reconciliation are rooted in the gospel, and that he doesn't fear the Trump administration. To put my message on the same plane as what the president has attempted to do here, I think is not understanding what the message of the gospel is, Leo told the Associated Press aboard the Papal plane en route to Algeria. And I'm sorry to hear that, but I will continue on what I believe is the mission of the Church in the world today. History's first U.S.-born Pope stressed that he was not making a direct attack against Trump or anyone else with his general appeal for peace and criticisms of the delusion of omnipotence, omnipotence, that is fueling the Iran war and other conflicts around the world. I will not enter into debate. The things that I say are certainly not meant as attacks on anyone. The message of the gospel is very clear. Blessed are the peacemakers, Leo said. I will not shy away from announcing the message of the gospel and inviting all people to look for ways of building bridges of peace and reconciliation and looking for ways to avoid war at any time that's possible. Speaking to other reporters, he added, I'm not afraid of the Trump administration or of speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel, which is what the church works for. We are not politicians. We do not look at foreign policy from the same perspective that he may have. the Pope said, adding, "I will continue to speak out strongly against the war, seeking to promote peace, promoting dialogue and multilateralism among states to find solutions to problems. Too many people are suffering today. Too many innocent people have been killed. And I believe someone would stand up and say that there's a better way," he said. Trump said Leo is not doing a very good job. Trump delivered an extraordinary broadside against Leo on Sunday night, saying he didn't think the U.S.-born global leader of the Catholic Church is doing a very good job, and that he's a very liberal person, while also suggesting the pontiff should stop catering to the radical left. Flying back to Washington from Florida, Trump used a lengthy social media post to sharply criticize Leo, then kept it up after deplaning in comments on the tarmac to reporters. "I'm not a fan of Pope Leo," he said. Trump's comments came after Leo suggested over the weekend that a delusion of emptiness is fueling the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. While it's not unusual for popes and presidents to be at cross purposes, it's exceedingly rare for the Pope to directly criticize the U.S. leader, and Trump's stinging response is equally uncommon, if not more so. "Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy," the president wrote in his post, adding, "I don't want a pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon." Italian politicians across the spectrum showed their solidarity with Leo. Premier Meloni sent a message of support for his peace mission, while the leader of the main opposition party, Elai Schlein, Schlein, was more direct, calling Trump's attacks extremely serious. Trump repeated that sentiment in comments to reporters, saying, "We don't like a pope who says it's okay to have a nuclear weapon." Later, Trump posted a picture suggesting he had saint-like powers akin to those of Jesus Christ. Wearing a biblical-style robe, Trump is seen laying hands on a bedridden man as light emanates from his fingers, while a soldier, a nurse, and a praying woman and a bearded man in a baseball cap all look on admiringly. The sky is filled with eagles, an American flag, and vaporous images. Leo's opposition to war irked Trump. All of that came after Leo presided over an evening prayer service in St. Peter's Basilica on Saturday, the same day the United States and Iran began face-to-face negotiations in Pakistan during a fragile ceasefire, with Vice President J.D. Vance leading the U.S. delegation. Vance is Catholic and recently released a book about his faith. During his evening prayer service, the Pope didn't mention the United States or Trump by name, but his tone and message appeared directed at Trump and U.S. officials who had boasted of U.S. military superiority and justified the war in religious terms. Leo, who is on an 11-day trip to Africa starting Monday, had previously said that God does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. He also referenced an Old Testament passage from Isaiah saying that even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Before the ceasefire, when Trump warned of mass strikes against Iranian power plants and other infrastructure, and that an entire civilization will die tonight, Leo described the sentiments as truly unacceptable. In a social media post on Sunday night, however, Trump went far beyond the war in Iran to criticizing Leo. The president wrote, "I don't want a pope who thinks it's terrible that America attacked Venezuela, a country that was sending massive amounts of drugs into the United States." That was a reference to the Trump administration having ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in January. "I don't want a pope who criticizes the President of the United States because I'm doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do," Trump added, referencing his 2024 election victory. He also suggested in a post that Leo only got his position because he was an American and they thought it would be the best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. "If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican," Trump wrote. Leo should get his act together as Pope, use common sense, stop catering to the radical left, and focus on being a great Pope, not a politician. It's hurting him very badly, and more importantly, it's hurting the Catholic Church. In his subsequent comments to reporters, Trump remained highly critical, saying of Leo, "I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess," and adding, "He's a very liberal person." Bishops say the Pope is not a politician. Archbishop Paul S. Coakley, Coakley, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, issued a statement saying he was disheartened by Trump's comments. Pope Leo is not his rival, nor is the Pope a politician. He is the vicar of Christ who speaks from the truth of the gospel and for care of souls, Coakley said. The Italian Bishops' Conference expressed regret over Trump's words and underlined that the Pope is not a political counterpart, but the successor of Peter, called to serve the gospel, truth, and peace. In the 2024 election, Trump won 55% of Catholic voters, according to AP VoteCast, an extensive survey of the electorate. But Trump's administration also has close ties to conservative and evangelical Protestant leaders and has claimed heavenly endorsement for the war on Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth urged Americans to pray for victory in the name of Jesus Christ, and when Trump was asked whether he thought God approved of the war, he said, "I do, because God is good. Because God is good, and God wants to see the people taken care of." And Winfield reported from aboard the Papal plane, and this article was written by the Associated Press. And thank you so much as you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 13th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Judy, that's me, and it has been such a pleasure and honor to read to you. Thank you so much for listening. Please take awesome care of yourselves and have a most wonderful day.